welcome to the College of Law and Centre for Legal Innovation's NewLaw Careers Summit 2022. I'm Gene Turner, and in my day job, I'm the Managing Director of LawHawk, and we're a legal automation consultancy based here in Wellington, New Zealand. I'm also a member of the CLI's Advisory Board, and the session tonight is on the role of the Legaltech developer. So I'm going to be acting as the facilitator for the session, and I'm going to be discussing it with a great panel, and that comprises Ben Farrow, who's the CEO of Firm Checker and also a CLI Emerging Leaders Board member. Sam Flynn, who's a co-founder of Joseph and also a CLI Advisory Board member. Sasha Kirk, who's co-founder and Chief Marketing Officer at Lawcadia. Sam Loveridge, who's co-founder of Legaltech Helper. And Toby Somerville, who's the VP of Engineering at Joseph. So in terms of an overall aim for the session today, really what we're looking is to try and give you a bit of an overview about what legal tech developers actually do, what a typical day looks like for them, the skills that you need for the role, and where the role's likely to go in the future. So we've got about an hour, so we'll just kick into it and get started. So first question I've got is for all the panelists, really, why did you take up your role in this area and what appealed to you most about it? So perhaps actually before we do that, I'll just quickly cover one thing, which is that apart from Toby, none of the rest of us are actually developers, but we work really closely with developers and so have a really good understanding about what they do and how to work with them. So there'll be a couple of perspectives here. There'll be the people who are sort of founded and running some legal tech businesses, and also Toby will be able to bring perspective of a developer who's come to work into legal tech. So just cover that background, but why don't we start with you, Toby? Actually, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, why you became a software developer in the first place, and then how you ended up getting into legal tech and what appealed to you about that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that. So I've been a developer for over 20 years now, and I actually got into it sort of by accident. I actually come from a business background. So I'm not I don't have a degree in law or in fact in computer science. I decided I wanted to start a business just at the perfect timing of the dot-com bust, just prior to, I must say. And at that point, I wanted to go online with the business. So I started learning a lot about how to build websites. And that led me to where I am today. The business didn't go anywhere, but I found a love of programming and bought a book, 20 ASP in 21 days, read it, and 3 weeks after finishing it, I started working at an advertising firm. So that's sort of how I got into the programming itself. How I came to be at Joseph, I was really drawn to Joseph's no-code platform and the idea of being able to spread legal advice more seamlessly and make it easier for people. Plus, there's a sort of a technical challenge of creating a no-code platform, which I was really drawn to. So yeah, that's kind of how I got where I am now.
Brilliant, thank you. Sasha, how about we go to you next? So you and Warwick, you're not developers, but you clearly sort of saw that there was a gap in the market, and that kind of interrelationship between an in-house team and a law firm, and sort of pretty complex set of sort of dynamics there. So tell us a bit about how you sort of decided to try and crack that one, and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. So Lawcadia is a two-sided legal technology platform, and we had the idea that we would use technology to transform the way that in-house legal teams were working with their law firms. And so back in 2015, we had the idea, did some research, and very quickly realised this was going to be, a potentially big opportunity for us. Now, through sort of contacts in the design area, we got a developer who did an accelerated MVP for us. And now that he got it to the point where we were able to get first revenue and get our first fundraise off it. And with that, we hired our first developer, Mahita Kamkanamgi. And so he's not on the call today, but I've had some amazing conversations with him about how he got into the legal industry and I guess really what the insights that he's got as a tech developer for a legal technology product. And I think one of the key things that he said that actually the technology is very similar between the legal industry and outside other areas, but there are some aspects that are quite different to the legal industry, and I'll touch on that I think in the next question that we get to. But certainly for him, he's been able to bring so much creativity and so much of his innovation to the work that he does in the legal tech space, because so many other industries they're already set. There's prescribed ways of doing things. There's already set systems and tools. Whereas we in the legal industry, we're just at that very, very early stage, where it actually feels like it's going to take off and it's going to, transform quite rapidly. And we're seeing the very beginnings of that right now. And so for him as a developer, he said he just loves being able to bring that creativity and that innovation and to really be able to sort of expand and push the boundaries. And so that really crosses, some very complex infrastructures, but also security, which is, absolutely critical when you're talking about, the sensitive nature of what can happen in the legal space.
Awesome. Yeah, when I think back to when you would have been setting up Lawcadia, there was just nothing really sort of in that space. So being able to imagine something that you think could be there and then find out how to build it, would be quite a challenging thing. And Sam Flynn, I'll come to you because Joseph's probably very similar to that in the sense of sort of like not only was there a gap there, but you're thinking, how do we now sort of enable other people to kind of be able to build stuff on top of that. So do you want to tell us a little bit how you fell into this legal tech space?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Gene. So I was a lawyer for a number of years. I worked in litigation, then I worked as a regulatory and commercial lawyer at Hive Legal, which is a new law firm and does a lot in the legal tech and new law space. So that was that piqued my interest. But the way I actually got involved in legal tech and started working with the very first developer I ever worked with was a web-based app that I built with this developer in 2016. It provided automated guidance and advice in relation to a particular area of the law. It was public transport ticketing infringements, which is a really big problem at the time in Victoria, where I live or where I'm based. And I don't know anything about technology or coding, or I've learned obviously over the years. I was probably technophobic, if anything, but came across this idea, came across this problem, and came up with the solution with this civil liberties group that I was a part of. And we went about finding a developer who could help us create this thing. We got really lucky. We found a very talented engineer who had also had a run-in with public transport officers on a tram, and so he was pretty angry and riled up, and so he said he'll build it with us for free. We launched that in 2016. We had tens of thousands of users on the first day, and the government ended up changing the law off the back of that to make a fairer regime here in Victoria. It was quite a strange regime that existed before that, and that's when I fell in love with the space for two primary reasons. One was that people really want and need legal tech, and that was shown by just the sheer number of people who accessed the tool in a short amount of time. When you get it right, people want this solution. And the second was you can drive real and meaningful change with technology and the law when you do it properly. And that was it for me. I fell in love with the space. I was thinking about becoming a barrister, but I put that to the side and started Joseph, which is a no-code automation platform. The mission really was to let anyone build something like what I built, that web-based app, but without having to find a disgruntled engineer to build it with you, but to use something called a no-code tool, which I think we'll get to a little bit later in the session as well.
Awesome, such cool ambition. Ben, we'll go to you next. Again, not a developer, but I guess from what I understand, you sort of came into this area because you've been working around the space and sort of you'd also seen some of the problems that kind of in the legal sector and came up with an idea. But can you tell us a bit more about how you sort of then decided to turn that into a business and what you do with Firm Checker?
Yeah, sure. So for those who aren't aware, Firm Checker is kind of like a TripAdvisor or a hot dog style platform for professional services firms, law firms and accountants in particular. And I guess much like Sam, it started from recognizing a problem and then deciding to see if I could do something about it. So in my case, I was working as a consultant for a market research firm that works in the professional services industry called Beaton, and they provide a lot of client experience data to large professional services firms. But at the same time, I was actually trying to create my own little business just on the side, and having to do engage lawyers or try to start to engage lawyers in getting that set up. And that was when I realized that despite having a legal background myself, I wouldn't have had the first clue about how to find a lawyer, which to me seemed pretty perverse. And if I wasn't able to do it, then what's someone who doesn't have my background going to be able to do? So that other business didn't really go anywhere, but then had the idea for this one and sort of started working on it there. And really for me, the challenge was a little bit different. I guess much like Sam, it was about finding the means to get something developed, not being a developer, rather than going about coding it myself. But through that, I've obviously had to be involved in the process through the whole way in terms of steering the overall direction of the platform.
Great, thank you. So Sam L, legal tech helper. Perhaps you can tell me a little bit about what you guys do. You've got a co-founder who's sort of more on the technical side as well. So how did you guys sort of get together, and how do you now sort of work together?
Yeah, so hi everyone. And so Legaltech Helper is a consulting and software development business, and my co-founder Tatiana is a software engineer, and we got together in 2019 because we were seeing that, that legal technology was very focused around corporate and larger law firms, and sort of the benefits of legal technology was really sort of focused on those two areas, and consumers were missing out on those benefits. So our focus was really on how we could use technology as an enabler to help address the unmet legal needs of ordinary people in terms of accessing legal information that's targeted to them and that they can actually action. So my background is as a corporate lawyer and in corporate legal operations. So I see myself as that sort of bridge between legal and technical. And Tatiana and I are basically sort of running this together and working very collaboratively in terms of solution design and whatnot. Great.
So I think if we look to sum up this first section, then it sort of seems like you don't actually have to be a developer. If you're a lawyer or somebody sort of in the space and you see a problem, you can actually still find ways to get that done, and that might mean even being able to find a developer to work for free if they're angry enough, or finding others that are happy to help. And as Toby said, you don't necessarily need to have a particularly structured sort of way to get into development either. There's different ways of being able to move into that space. So that's really cool. So we'll look now at the sort of more of what's actually involved in the role. And Toby, we'll go to you again first, since you're the developer. And I'm just keen to get a bit of a feel for what does a typical day look like for a software developer today. And maybe if there's anything in particular that you think is different in terms of being a legal tech developer compared to the other roles that you've had.
I'd probably answer the second part first. In many ways, being a developer is not standard across the industry, but there's certain key things that you do. I think the difference with legal tech specifically is that the angle on security is probably, it is much more in sharp focus. There's a lot more attention to the process and details on what bits and pieces get done. Whereas in other industries, it can be a little less stringent on certain things. Nearly good enough can go out the door. Whereas when it comes to legal tech, that isn't good enough. It has to be what it should be. So to answer the first part, what does the average day look like? I have to be kind of pretty general in this because it also depends on what your role is within the development team. So if you're a tech lead, your day looks very different to that of a junior developer. So to give an idea, a tech lead would be making sure that everybody has the work that they should be working on, making sure that the standard of stuff is being done, whereas a junior developer is sort of doing more basic type work, won't be attacking some of the really difficult problems unless they're working, pairing up with another developer. But on a sort of average day, what does that look like? Well, we work very agilely, and we work in agile is not as in sort of the corporate agile, but actually agilely, meaning that we are very flexible in how we work. So we have certain rituals and certain things we do each day. So we have a stand-up, which for the uninitiated is about understanding what you've been working on, what you're planning to be working on, and anything that's stopping you working on the things that you're supposed to be working on. We'll also have, not on a daily basis, things like retros, so retrospectives, where we talk about the last period of work. So for us, it's the last 2 weeks, and we'll talk about what went well, what didn't go so well, and what we're going to do to improve it, and just talk about how we're doing and the work that we're doing. So in between all of those bits and pieces, what does a day look like to a developer? They'll be assigned or pick up cards to work on, and there'll be sort of small slithers of individual features or what have you of work that they're going to attack, or a particular bug or a problem, and then work on that. And they'll work in collaboration with the rest of the team. So it's for us, development is very much a team sport. It's not an individual sport. It sort of starts off as an individual sport, but as you grow, you have to have teams and you have to work together. So a developer will be working on those cards. You may be doing some estimation. So if product comes to you and goes, oh, we've got this particular feature that a customer is after, how long is that going to take? What's going to be involved? So working that sort of stuff out. The other sort of parts of it is looking at other people's code and making sure it meets the standard of the business, and making sure that they haven't missed something or inadvertently put a security hole into a piece of work. And then there's testing. So not only testing your own work, but testing other people's work and making sure that it's what it needs to be. So in a very sort of generalized way, that's the sort of day that you have. Essentially solving your own problems and solving problems for others. But there's no, this is what a day looks like for a developer. Each day is different.
Very interesting. Apart from the bits at the beginning, where you're planning your day out, and then the retrospectives where you sort of look back on it, it sounds quite similar to what lawyers do. It's just what about you, Ben? Do you want to talk about sort of, I guess, how developers work in your business, and what a typical day might look like for them?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a lot of overlap in terms of working with Agile, Scrum in particular for us, but daily stand-ups, retrospectives, sprints, all that sort of stuff that I think is ground that's well covered. In terms of the how they fit in within the business, I think it's bringing the ideas of the commercial team to life from the perspective of front-end features. So things that the customer is likely to see, they're not necessarily coming up with the idea in the first place, but they're pivotal in determining how we actually implement an idea or solve a problem. So as much as possible, the way we interact as people like myself or my colleagues who work in more of the commercial side of the business will come to the tech team with problems that customers might be facing, and then we can collaborate on how those problems are solved. And I think that's actually quite an important way of doing it, because if we just come in with a solution and just say, hey, this is something that we need to build for the customers, then we might not actually implement it in as elegant a way as a developer with that technical background might be able to do it. So as much as possible, we just try to bring them problems and then collaborate over how a solution gets implemented. And then there's also an element of, I guess, bringing ideas from a technical standpoint to us more proactively and saying, here are ways that we need to upgrade our tech, and then here's how urgent it is, here's how much work it's going to take. And then that gives us, as I guess I'm sort of a product manager, I can then make decisions about how that then gets prioritized in line with more customer facing features. So I guess it's coming in at the how stage of our product development, and then also coming in at the sort of what and what is the problem stage when it comes to more technical problems. But we try and involve our technical people as early on as possible in the process, just so that we aren't building things unnecessarily or aren't sort of bringing bloat into the product and things like that by just saying build this, because a lot of the time they'll have better ideas than we do.
Yeah, exactly. So it's definitely sort of one thing to be building a solution, but actually knowing kind of what problems that you're trying to solve is critical. And Sasha, I'll come to you because I'd be interested in your thoughts around that kind of collaborative aspect and kind of how you work with your developers to make sure that everybody's sort of understanding where you're trying to go.
I think Toby and Ben have really nailed what it's like from the developers from a process perspective, and sort of really echoing what Ben said. So really, it's the client-facing part of our business will often go to our developers with a problem, and that might be an idea, some new functionality, some features. It might be something specifically that a client has asked for, or something that they might be needing. And then what we will try and pose it as a problem. This is the client problem that needs to be solved, and we'll give some color to it. But it's really important that we don't get too specific around, well, we solve it by doing this, this, and this, because as soon as you take it too far, then you really miss out on some of that really beautiful, creative, technical aspects that a developer can bring to it. So we'll pose with the business problem, and then our head developer, Mahida, he will then sort of break that down into some business requirements. So this is what he thinks are the key requirements that will fit into a solution that might go back to that problem. And then he'll verify that with the key stakeholders in Legaltech. And then once that's done, then he'll break that down into some technical requirements. And that's when the developers will start working on meeting those requirements. And then again, verify that back again with the stakeholders in the business. And then it's about making it really usable, really elegant, and and just really focus on that customer experience. So that's kind of the process that we run through it, and it works really well for us, and we're really grateful to have a fantastic team that I do really think are punching well above their weight in terms of, I guess, their creativity and innovation that they can bring to the industry.
Yeah, it really does seem like it has to be something where it is collaborative, but also the developers are really involved in understanding the business enough to know kind of what a really good outcome would look like. And I just had a bit of a flashback to a developer that I worked with in my old law firm, and I wanted to do some stuff around Net Promoter Score. And so I kind of explained some of the basics of it, but he was kind of an interesting guy, and he went away and he read up a whole bunch of stuff about Net Promoter Score because he found it really interesting as well. So he came back with a whole bunch of stuff that I'd never even thought of, because he just kind of like thought, actually, I get the concept, and when it dug into it. And so it was great what he was able to come back with. It was way beyond what I'd originally been thinking. So I guess it's sort of not necessarily that all the ideas have to come in and developers come up with the how, even, is it? It's sort of like they really can kind of actually bring in completely new ideas. And
it works so well, Jean. Like even today, our developers, two of our developers came into our sales and marketing stand up and presented a new feature that they've been working on, and they showed us what we had said we'd wanted, solve this problem, and then they're like, oh, but while you're here, let me show you this. And we were like, it was something that we hadn't even comprehended, and we were just like, yeah. So it's really amazing if you step back and not be too prescriptive, just what people can deliver.
Oh, that's really cool. So we'll move on to the next sort of section, I suppose, which is quite interesting. It's sort of the skills and capabilities, or what knowledge you need to bring and to be considered for a role. And I guess again, we've sort of got this kind of concept of the Legaltech developer, but I think there's probably a bit of a spectrum here, and maybe at one end of the spectrum is, might be more that sort of legal engineer type concept, and it's probably closer to where we are at Lawhawk, where we're just trying to sort of use software which has already been developed and figure out how to get the most out of it. And I think that's probably quite similar to the customers that Sam has on the Joseph platform as well. There's sort of the developer concept, and it's more about, I think, kind of using legal expertise, seeing a problem, and how to sort of solve that as best you can with that platform. And then there's obviously a much more sort of full development type role where you're actually writing code and compiling it, etc. So why don't we start with you, Sam Flynn, because you're in that sort of privileged position where I guess you can see a whole bunch of activity on the platform and probably getting a feel for like what works and what doesn't. So what do you think makes for somebody who's kind of a good developer on a no-code platform?
Yeah, interesting. So sort of like a citizen developer, is that the question?
Yeah, I think so. Sort of, how does somebody kind of who wants to get started in that area, like what would enable them, I suppose, if you're sort of thinking, I want to get a job to do that stuff, like what would make for somebody who was going to be good at that role?
Yeah, cool. I mean, there's so many different ways you can go about it. I think going back to your point before, Jean, about developing an expertise in identifying the problems or identifying opportunities for automation or whatever it is that you're building through the no-code platform is probably where you can contribute the most value if you're not actually an engineer or a developer. And for anyone who was just in the legal technologist session, I assume that was something that was covered off there as well. Ali Cook from Joseph was speaking in that session. That's something that she does really well, having some legal background and some technology background. I think there's an easy way of thinking about it is breaking it down into the work that you actually do as a no-code developer or a citizen developer. So I think the first is identifying opportunities. So I think to do that, you need to have a level of creativity and comfort with what the tools can do. I think the second thing that you have to do when you're building out digital solutions using no-code platforms is planning, preparing, identifying where it sits in a process as well. So developing systems thinking, process thinking, rather than just looking at individual tasks or units of work. Third is actually building the solution, which can be pretty tricky and challenging for anyone who's had a hand at building a no-code tool, even though it's simple and you don't have to know how to actually code. There's still some technical challenge in there. So I think being technically minded and having clarity of thought is probably the third thing that I would encourage you to develop, or the muscle that I'd encourage you to exercise. Number 4 is user experience design. So you can build something that works technically and pumps out the document or answers the question, but are people actually going to want to use it? I think a really big lever that we have to pull to drive usage of tools like this is to make it a good user experience, or UX design, to use some jargon. And there's a lot you can research and find out online, but I think ultimately that requires you to have some level of empathy, to put yourself in the shoes of the people who are going to use the tool you build, to make it as usable and as friendly as possible. And the final thing that you need to do when you're building no-code digital tools is testing, maintenance, and ownership going forward. And that's the one that people often forget about. And it's probably the one that I think takes the most, how do I put it? Maybe like diligence or passion, right? And so when I was thinking about that, what do people need to develop in order to do that? It's kind of a strength of conviction or a diligence that you're going to own it and you're going to carry it forward as this sort of living, breathing tool that continues to help people.
Cool. Samantha, how about you? About Legaltech Helper and what makes sort of, I guess, the type of work you do, how does somebody go about doing that really well?
Yeah, look, actually, I agreed with a lot of things that have been said by Sam just now. So, with Tatiana, she's a software engineer. She does all the coding. She's a free and open source software advocate, so that's something really important. Being able to do the full stack, developing front end, back end, and then sort of increasingly it's the DevOps side as well. but that it's not just about the technical solution. It is about the sort of impact of what you're building on the end user. So the deep empathy, the creativity, so what Sasha mentioned, the creative problem solving, sort of anticipating what the impact will be on the user, because essentially you might build something, but if it's not a frictionless and seamless experience, people will not use it, they won't come back, they'll be alienated from it. So those sort of creative skills and the sort of being able to translate the technical language into language that others understand as well. And essentially with Tatiana and I, because it's a team of two, and what we're trying to do is essentially take the technical load off the subject matter experts and build the software solutions for them. It's really around the deep listening, understanding the client problem, really working at the outset together as a team with the client to understand what the problem is, so that we're developing a solution that's going to meet the needs of the client and other stakeholders. So really being involved in that entire process. So I think, those people skills, in addition to the technical skills, are very important.
Yeah, a couple of other thoughts I had just in terms of like the using the softwares, and how it's sort of perhaps a bit different from working as a lawyer. You really do have to learn how to maximize what you can do with the software. So, like I think some of the legal technologist stuff talked about, like Word and Outlook, most lawyers really only scratch the surface in terms of what's possible, but you really have to put the time in to learn how to do things well. And then I think, Sam, you're right about that diligence and sort of, it's not like writing an opinion where you just sort of get to a point where you're sick of it, or you've run out of the fee cap or something, and so it's just like sort of save and send. Sort of like it won't work if you don't actually make sure that you've dotted the I's and crossed the T's and sort of got it kind of to a point where it actually will work in the way it needs. So it's pretty unforgiving in that sense. Hey, we'll go to who do we go to now? Sasha and Ben, maybe, as sort of people that are, I guess, more like to hire developers. Are you able to say what you would sort of be looking for if you were sort of somebody was looking to get into this space, and what would you be looking for in terms of a good developer?
I'm happy to start. To say the obvious, you've obviously got the technical expertise and experience aspect, where somebody has to have the proficiency in the particular stack that you have, and the direction that you want to go, and we'll put people through technical tasks in order to cover off on that, which would be the same in any industry, but in particular for the legal industry, other things we're looking for are understanding of what we're trying to do as a business. Actually put in some research into what we're doing as a business, why we exist. It's just going to make the communication that we have with the developer so much easier in terms of coming up with new ideas and implementing them, because they'll have that context. And if somebody can do a bit of research and satisfy us that they actually know what we're trying to do, and are not just looking at it purely as a technical role, then that's obviously to the good. And then a big thing as well is communication, and specifically not just saying yes to everything and being a soldier who tries to implement anything that we say, but actually pushing back and demonstrating an ability to push back on not just our ideas about how we might look to implement a solution and coming up with ideas that might work better, but also even on timelines, like having the courage to say, actually, I don't think that with the resources we have, this is a reasonable goal for these reasons, and here's how we might either reduce scope or increase the time that we dedicate to it. That's just going to result in better outcomes in the long run if it's somebody who's prepared to have those sorts of conversations, rather than just look for direction all of the time, because that can be something that actually creates work for someone who's hiring them. So they're the main things that we look for.
Sasha?
Yeah, and I think for us, if you look at the technology space versus legal tech, the main difference that we see when looking at a developer's perspective is, from a developing point of view, is actually the perspective that it comes with it. So legal, as I mentioned, it's it's highly sensitive in its nature. Our business has a huge amount of focus on security, so cybersecurity. We manage issues on our platform from the Royal High Commissions of banks all the way through to many other, government and parliamentary issues. And so security has to be paramount. And I think it's that perspective that is really important when we are looking at developers. So our head developer, he said that for, developers in general, if they can, they like to take shortcuts, because that's what you do with tech. If you know a shortcut, you try and take it, or you research some different shortcuts to get around different problems. And that's normal in other industries. But in the legal tech space, we have to take the long road. And as a lead developer, he has to take the developers on that long road with him to make sure that things aren't shortcut, and that we're really keeping the quality of our infrastructure and our security is really integral and complete. So that's kind of, that's one thing that we look for. Another trick thing that we do in interviews, and I'm going to share it with you today, feel free to steal it, is that when we do the technical interviews, Mahida will ask a question, and I wouldn't know whether it's right or wrong. So he'll ask a really technical question, and the unsuccessful candidate will come up with a solution, will come up with an answer, and it'll just be bluster. It won't be true, because he's asked an impossible question. There is no actual answer to it. And so I really, coming up with a fake answer isn't helpful, because that's looking to take a shortcut, and that's not what we want to have in our organization. So what we want is someone who puts their hand up and says, actually, I don't know the answer to that, but this is how I go about finding it. So they're the people that are successful candidates, when we're hiring developers. And so we want people that are open, that put their hand up when they don't know, but are just really willing to learn. And then really closing that out, we have a team of testers and QA people that will work solidly with their developers, and then also with customer success, and then also with our client solutions team to test, because that, we want to spend so much time doing that, because otherwise you're not going to be giving that amazing user experience that we want to bring to the market.
Just to add to that, Sasha, where you were saying, put your hand up and say, I don't know the answer, but here's how I'd go about it. I think something in addition that we find results in successful applicants is people who are actually willing to ask questions of you and further narrow down and try to get to what's at the heart of your question. And it shows a curiosity about your business as well. And it's a good indicator that they're more likely to be engaged and come up with more thoughtful solutions rather than, as you say, just bluster.
That's really interesting. One other thing I've seen was quite a few developers is they love solving problems, but often to the point where they won't ask if there's somebody else who's already figured that out, and kind of act like if there's an easy way to do it. So you'll find out that they've gone off and they'll read all the API developer documents and they'll try and nut it out. And it's like, why don't you just ask? Someone could have told you that. So it seems to be a sort of quite a strong trait of that sort of problem solving, but sometimes just asking a question. But Toby, I'm interested to come to you, because we've chatted before about sort of obviously the path that you took into the development, which wasn't that structured, and you're also involved in hiring. But I think you've also sort of looked at how does somebody potentially who hasn't got that sort of that necessarily the software development background still might have other skills that enables them to perhaps to get a start in the industry. So bearing in mind the audience, some of the people, maybe lawyers that are kind of keen to see how they could potentially move into development. Are you able to add to that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what Ben and Sasha are saying. The ability of somebody to be honest in their knowledge, and the smartest person in the room is the person who will say, don't know, I can find out, but I don't know. So what I look for in a developer is the attitude that they're going to be a team player, that they're going to be a cultural fit, that they have that curiosity in trying to find the answer and that drive to get the answer. Because a lot of the time within development, you'll have problems that are really sticky problems, and they take a lot to get to the bottom of them and figure them out. And it's having that mental toughness and drive to go, no, I want to get this done, and I want to get it right. I want to find the solution to this problem. So in terms of, at the moment, we have a young lady who has actually moved from being a legal technologist over into the engineering department. And that move, why did she, essentially get to move across into the engineering department? Because having a new, more junior developer takes a lot of work from the rest of the team. And it boiled down to the attitude that she wanted to build a better product. She had gone to the extent of not only starting to learn how to develop as her skills as a developer, but she was willing to take time out of her normal role to go and learn how to be a developer. And one of the best ways of demonstrating to me a developer really wants to be a developer and has a love of coding and the interest in what is essentially a lot of problem solving is actually having their own side project, actually creating something. Doesn't matter what it is, but having a side project that they're working on, because that's where the bulk of learning happens for an engineer. It's in the doing. It's not in the classroom. It's not in tutorials. It's in the doing and having to work out, I've got this problem. How do I fix it? So it's a combination of that attitude and the willingness and want to work with people for a goal, and not for bettering yourself, but to get to a solution. And that's the goal, that's the thing that drives them. So when I see developers who are like that, who are driven to make good software, and that's what they want to do, and they want to help others make good software, to me, that's what makes a perfect developer.
So would it be sort of fair to say, when we move on, that kind of if you're a lawyer looking to move into the space, the bar is reasonably high in the legal tech space in terms of like the skills, but there's a lot you could do, at least if you want to be taken credibly as the sort of somebody who could make that move. That you could be using the no-code tools that are available and figuring out how to get the most out of those, and learning how to structure your thinking, and to kind of perhaps getting an understanding about what's actually happening underneath the surface there, and maybe, as you said, Toby, reading books or doing some courses or having a side project where you can show that it's not just a kind of an idle ambition, but you really are focused on making this a career, not sort of a way of getting out of an existing career that you're not happy with, if you like.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. Does anybody else got any thoughts on that, just in that transitional thing? So, if there are lawyers on the call that are thinking, how would they move in this direction? Any other nuggets of wisdom?
I think I would just say, look, it's an emerging field, so I think there's no hard and fast rules around this too. So just be, mindful of that. Well, not mindful of it. I think that's exciting. We're sort of defining it as we go, and there is that blurring between legal and tech here. That, obviously people from both backgrounds can be doing this, and we're not bound by particular platforms or offerings. There's a huge variety and scope of software and platforms we can be using. So I think it's very exciting for anyone doing that.
Yeah, very much. Which I guess flows into the final sort of part of the session, which is really what's likely to happen with this type of role in the future. And one of the things that I've been sort of watching is the emergence of the low-code, or probably more low-code software development platforms. And I know some other software development companies that I'm familiar with have actually made a move from sort of writing so much of their own code as to using sort of these platforms to be able to do more themselves. It's not that they don't then go and write the extra code to sort of refine it further, but they're trying to make the most out of what's available to work as efficiently as they can. I know it seems to me like potentially it's sort of something that might make it a bit easier for a less technical person to be able to make that move, because perhaps there's more you could do working alongside real experts, but you can take sort of some more of the knowledge you've got and perhaps do some of the coding and build skills in that way. But I guess, Toby, I'd be interested in your thoughts, because you're probably the only one who really understands what these platforms are and where they're at and where they're heading, and if this is actually likely to be something which makes becoming a developer more accessible, perhaps for people on this type of a call that maybe don't have that formal coding background, at least at this stage.
It's interesting where the no code the low-code platforms are at, they certainly have a place because they can allow you to build specific applications, but generally quite simple. Because of how they work, they have sort of like general building blocks that can fit together, and there's a lot of complexity that sits in those blocks to make them work, which is a sort of a problem itself, but they're very generic. So you can add more code into them to make them and adjust them and what have you, and that's certainly an area where you can get more experience, but it's kind of like a super focused area. It doesn't lend itself to, if you want to be a developer, there's certain skills you'll get in general understanding, but not sort of detailed skills. And where these low-code platforms sort of fall down is when you want to sort of take them out of their comfort zone and go more complex in what you're doing and have more detailed access to the data and how you want to manipulate it. And they're just not designed for that. And it would be just monstrous to try and design those sort of pieces. So in terms of are they useful? Absolutely. You can build simple applications with them, but if you're looking to build something that's going to be more complex in the future, then it can be a bit of a dead end in itself, because trying to get your data back out of the system and into a format that you want and making it more complex, it gets very hard. And the other piece is integrating into other systems becomes very difficult with those. A better sort of, if you want to start with the idea of, I suppose, understanding the programming flow and how things can work, no code works better for that, because you're not being locked into a specific way of doing things. It allows you to understand the flow and the logic behind bits and pieces. So that, to my mind, is a better way of getting an understanding and kind of testing the waters, if you like, is if you want to, if that appeals to you to being a developer and you want to get into it, that's an easier route than into the more complex low-code stuff. And who knows what the future looks like for any of these bits and pieces with machine learning and quantum computing and all those sort of things that are both here and in the future. But I think if you're serious about wanting to be a developer, then that's it. Low code doesn't give you many options for the future. You have to kind of lock in and learn a lot of stuff, and then you'd have to jump back out and learn how to develop as a sort of side thing. But I think there's definitely a place for it, and I think for relatively simple applications, it has a lot of value, but it's very niche in terms of for developers themselves.
So no immediate shortcuts coming up.
Jean, can I maybe put in a plug too for free and open source software? So I'm going to channel Tatiana, my co-founder here, and say, using, something like Docassemble, which is something we use to build our guided pathways, and we use other free and open source software as well, allows us to leverage that community of users who are contributing and improving code, and there's no vendor lock-in when you're using free and open source software, so that's a benefit for clients. And Docassemble is used around the world actually, and was developed by a lawyer, a geeky lawyer, so has that that awareness from a lawyer's perspective, but it's not low code, but certainly there are lawyers around the world who are using it. So I would just sort of mention that too for someone who's interested in this space.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely makes it more accessible for people that have got some interest to be able to to get involved and get a start without needing to necessarily have a big budget to be able to do it. But are there any other thoughts among the panel in terms of where you see things are heading in terms of like what change is coming? I can see such a hand up quickly there.
Yeah, I mean, we've been giving this a lot of thought. And I think in the short term, really sort of layering on what Toby was saying, is that I think products are going to become more intelligent and more robust with new features, and I guess with that comes complexities. And then I think if we're looking into the long term, what could be happening is certainly even artificial intelligence writing code and it being able to build apps and do code for products. I think that's certainly the direction that we're heading. It's not going to happen overnight, but that's not to say that there will be no role or job for developers. There's still going to be a big team of developers that sit around that, but they might be doing some other really cool stuff while the AI might be doing some code and testing and that type of stuff. It's certainly not the end of developers. It probably just means that they're going to be able to do some more interesting and exciting things. But certainly I think the future's really bright, and it's exciting.
It's interesting, actually. You don't really hear sort of developers kind of talking about the advances in technology as if it's somehow going to be bad and take their jobs away. Like it's just the lawyers and legal techs is more of a fear, isn't there? Whereas kind of developers like, that's exciting. I'll get to do even more cool stuff. I don't hear any of them thinking they're going to be out of work anytime soon. Okay, well, that's been really, really interesting. Hopefully helpful for people. I guess it seems to be not that different from working as a lawyer, really. You have to kind of decide if this is the career you want to go, and you've got to really knuckle down and work hard and learn how to do it as well as you can. So it's not a hobby thing. You have to be able to deliver value and do things that solve real problems and that work really well and that continue to work. So there's some pretty exciting opportunities in the space, I think, like you said, Sam. So it's just a case of, I suppose, if people are thinking, how do we do this? There are lots of people that you can talk to and get feedback from, and maybe they can help make introductions or get you started in the right direction. We'll see if there's any questions. It looks like we've just got one here at the moment. I like this. Bit of a raw question, but what's the burnout attrition rate in the legal tech developer space? Do you see developers come in and out, such as what's seen among tech companies, I say law firms, or do they tend to stay for the long run? Who wants to take that one to start with? What's your turn, like Joseph?
I'll jump in on that one. So that's an interesting question. It all depends really on kind of the culture of the business that you're working in. It's true that in the San Francisco space, Facebook, etc., that there is perceived to be a very high, although they're not legal tech, but they're high attrition rates within developers and just burning people. It depends on the company you're working for. For instance, we don't believe in like long working hours. There's loads of places that will tell you, you need to be working 12 hours a day to be a developer. But in my experience, that's totally counterproductive and ends up with a worse product than a better product. So I'd say, for instance, we haven't had any attrition within our company of people who are getting burnt out. And in fact, we're a very caring team. And if somebody feels like they've got too much, then they need to be talking to us so that we can pull back. Because also, what isn't in this question is you never know what's going on in somebody's other parts of their lives, their personal lives, and that can have a big impact on how much work you can take on and what's going on in your life. So we're very open. We are very caring about our developers and what happens to them. So again, it depends on your company. If the company is just driven by hours sitting coding, then you're going to have an attrition rate. You're just going to, because you're not treating people as people, you're just treating them as a resource, and that's never going to be fun, and they're going to churn through people.
Anyone else want to comment on that?
Yeah, just echo what Toby said. I think it's so important for us to be able to retain our staff, and so bringing that culture is really key to it. We want people that want to stay, and we want people that really love what they're doing and are continuing to bring their best self to the job. And that doesn't mean long hours. And I guess that's what's important to us. And I think for people in the audience who are looking for thinking of going into this space, that there are plenty of roles going out there that offer big money, but with that will come other things that you have to compromise on. And I guess it's a hard decision to make. But I guess in my career, I've always chosen my roles through culture, because if you're with a great bunch of people working on something that you believe in, or that you're going, you can see yourself benefiting out of, then that always wins in the long run, hands down. Good luck to everybody.
It certainly sounds like it's an employee's market as well at the moment. So it's probably, if you're not happy, I'm sure there's plenty of opportunities. But one other thing which actually maybe is related to this, and Toby, I think we discussed this and we caught up recently, which is, I think you're based in Tasmania, and kind of it seems like software development teams are spread all over the place. So in terms of like going back to the question about day-to-day work and what it looks like, where are teams, does it matter where people are located so much these days? How does it work?
No, really. The hard bit of having our team for context, we have people in the Philippines, we have someone in Romania, we have someone in Israel, I'm in Tasmania, we have people in Melbourne, so all diverse, and in fact somebody in Japan. So we've got people all over the shop, as it were, but working as one team. It has its challenges. Obviously, the biggest probably of those is time zones, but we're careful to work with the developers so that we don't get people having to be up in the middle of the night for meetings they don't need to be at. We make sure that things are asynchronous wherever possible, so that they can dip in and out and not miss out on bits and pieces, and they can take their local holidays rather than the Australian holidays. So there's a lot of challenges to that, but it also means you get this wonderful diversity of opinion and thought and experiences. And that's super helpful. That really makes a difference. You ultimately don't want in a team everybody with the same opinion. You want to have people challenging, not just for challenge's sake, but well-considered other viewpoints. And by having a diverse team across the world, that's what we get.
That's cool. We've just got one last question before we wrap up from Samantha. What would be your advice to a law student thinking about going in this direction? Can you recommend any good courses? Any thoughts on that one? I guess we're going to throw to you again, Toby.
I'll take this one again. If you're thinking of going in this direction, I would suggest have a go with no code. So get a feel for the logical progression of things, where it's relatively simple to do and easy, and you can progressively get more complex. If you're interested in becoming a full-blown developer, then I can actually recommend a simple course. There's a course done by a guy called Mosh. He's a 1-hour Python course on YouTube. He's brilliant, and he explains things very easily, from the very basics of setting up your computer in order to use Python, where to get the stuff, and then walks you through basic building of things in 1 hour. And that would be a really good place to start in terms of just understanding programming, some of the things that you have to do, and also getting the simple joy of something printing out on the screen. And I can't overemphasize just the simplicity of that, the hello world statement, actually getting a result. So yes, there's a guy called Mosh. If you look him up on YouTube, he's got lots of videos, but he's very good at explaining how to program, and I would recommend it is free. Have a look there, try some of his courses, see how you go.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, well, the hour's flown by, so it brings things to an end. So I just want to say thanks to all of the faculty for all of your awesome insights. It's been really interesting just sort of getting the different perspectives and what you're all doing with your amazing businesses. So thank you for that. A recording of the session is going to be available shortly as a video and as a podcast, so keep an eye out for that. And if you'd like to receive updates about the release date of the recordings and the work of the College of Law and the Centre for Legal Innovation, please make sure that you follow them on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And after that, I'll say thanks again and have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.